Our program will start in a couple of minutes. Oh, I don't know. I would like to invite everyone in the fellowship hall, please to come in back in the sanctuary. Okay, we're going to have an opening song, 294. Keep singing until. Thank you. Thank you for this opening song. Let's have a word of prayer before we start the program. Our most gracious, loving Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your Sabbath day. Today is the beautiful morning. Now, this afternoon we have a health presentation. Please send thy Holy Spirit into the speaker so that he will give us your message in health. May we are blessed with the message, and may we apply what we learn into our daily life. In Jesus' name, amen. Welcome to our first presentation of 2023 Health Series. And I would have a privilege and honor to introduce to you Dr. Joan Sabate from Loma Linda University School of Public Health. May I read a short bio from him? Dr. Joan Sabate is Professor of Nutrition and Epidemiology at Loma Linda University School of Public Health, where he directs the Center for Nutrition and Healthy Lifestyle. Originally from Spain, Dr. Sabate is board-certified physician in internal medicine who moved to the United States to practice public health nutrition. Being a member of the U.S. 2020 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee is his most recent contribution to public health. Dr. Sabate was the principal investigator of nutrition intervention trial that directly linked the consumption of walnuts to significant reductions in serum cholesterol, published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1993. He is a co-investigator of Adventist Health Studies, prospective epidemiological studies relating to a dietary intake with health outcomes that have the largest cohort of vegetarians. For the past 25 years, he has been the principal investigator of many human nutrition intervention trials investigating the health effects of nuts, avocados, berries, and other plant foods. Dr. Sabate directs the Environmental Nutrition Research Program at Loma Linda University School of Public Health that focuses on sustainable diets and explores the interrelationships between the environmental and health impacts of food choices. What an impressive bio. Dr. Sabate, the time is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Brother David Nguyen, for such a nice introduction. It's for me a pleasure to be here, but I can tell you that without him, I would not be here. He was patient enough to convince me to come and has made all the arrangements for me to be here. What a nice church. And I'm not just talking about the layout. I'm impressed by the warmth, the camaraderie, the meal, and the layout of this church. I have not seen any church that, you can stay in the foyer and the main sanctuary, and also with just a crystal door, you can be into the kitchen. This is like the modern houses that have an open floor. And I think that probably is true that the architects decide on the type and personality that people live in that houses. Having an open floor makes this very open. I'm impressed by not only the warmth, but also because this, just what I see, is the first time here, after 37 years in Southern California, that I see a church that truly represents the makeup of Southern California. I would not say this is an ethnic church or it's a mixed church. It's just the people that live in Southern California that choose on Saturday to come here to worship. What a privilege, to be members and of this church. So thank you for inviting me, brother. Thank you. As you know by my accent, I'm not from here. I'm from Barcelona, Spain. And I had, I would say, a normal life. I was married. We had the first son. I was a physician working in a university hospital. But somehow I had the intention to study nutrition because I thought this is one of the ethos of the Adventist philosophy. So for 2 years, I started applying for grants. And finally, I got a Fulbright scholarship, and I went to Loma Linda. The committee that interviewed me in Spain, they said, why are you going to go to Loma Linda? This is a small sectarian university when you have been accepted at Johns Hopkins or at Minnesota. And I said, I'm going there because I want to learn more about the vegetarian diets. And I think that nutrition is important for the health of the public. And they say, okay, I mean, you make the decision, I mean, this is the scholarship, you go there. I was somehow hesitant during the first years, during the first months, but during the spring break with my wife and our young son, we went by car to visit Berkeley. That it was my dream to attend and to visit Johns Hopkins. And I reaffirmed that I think the decision to go to Loma Linda was the best one. Because the other schools, even though bigger, maybe more professors, more books, but didn't have what I wanted to learn. So it has, for me, a pleasure to be a student, a master's student, a doctoral student in nutrition, to be a postdoc, and what I'm going to present is what I did during my postdoc and subsequent things, and to be an assistant professor, an associate professor, a professor. So I spent more than half of my life now at Loma Linda. I've been there for 38 years. So if you know arithmetics, 30 plus 38, you know my age, okay? Okay, I'm going to talk about something that is close to my heart, that is the health effects of nuts. So I titled this, Nuts to You, okay? I think it has a different expression in English as well, but since I don't know much, I know that nuts has many connotations. I mean, to be nuts, be a little bit crazy. I know the nutty professor, another expression, and I know the nuts. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about the nutritional and health effects of eating nuts. Let's see if I know how to. No. Let's see if I know. Okay. So, what is a nut? It has many meanings. But let's show now, you say, the botanical meaning or the meaning of the fruit. Basically, nut is a type of food that is a fruit, is typically on a tree, but that we eat the seed of the fruit. So when I learn, you are what you eat, I realized I was nuts. So that's why this animal is going to the psychiatric, because I'm saying he realized that he was nuts. This is one of the jokes that was published when we published our results with the Adventist Health Study that you are going to see. So, what are the types of nuts? There are basically two types of nuts, what we call the tree nuts, and here you have. How many of you recognize these nuts? Okay, a volunteer over there. So, which ones? Starting from the top. The top to the left. Brazil nut, walnuts, pecans, macadamias, pistachios, cashews, hazelnuts, and almonds. Okay, these are the most commonly consumed and commercialized nuts. But there is another type of nut that is the most common in North America, and one that everybody consumes, is peanuts. Peanut is not a tree nut, it's a ground nut. But it's inside a pot, so botanically, peanuts is not a nut, it's a legume. That's why, of all the nuts, it's the one with the highest content of protein. 25% by weight of peanuts is pure protein. So I'm going to discuss a little bit the differences, but for people that have money to spend, buy these nuts. But for people that is on a tight budget. Peanuts have almost the same qualities or the same qualities that most of the nuts, but less than half the price. Okay, tree nuts and peanuts are common foods in many cultures and diets, intrinsic to several dietary guidelines worldwide, and also growing consumer visibility and interest. Everybody now is interested in nuts. And why? Because nuts are concentrated sources of energy, excellent sources of protein and fat, and they're sources of many vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals. I like hiking, and I climbed with a group Kilimanjaro, and we were having just a package of nuts in the pocket. Because eating nuts, are high in protein and high in fat, can keep you, with energy a lot. The trail mix is a mix of nuts and dry fruit. That also is a concentrated sources of energy. So I would say that this is the natural foods, for that doesn't need cooking, doesn't need preparation. They have a long shelf life, so it's kind of God's gift to us as far as the best fast food that we have. Okay, let me tell the story. I was finishing my doctorate in nutrition on the growth of vegetarian children. That's why I went to Loma Linda. I wanted to know how the vegetarian children were growing. But all my grants from Spain were out. So, by then I had a wife and 2 kids. And we were newly came to this country. My wife has no work permit. So we had to find some place to survive. So I went to Dr. Gary Fraser, the director of the Adventist Health Study, and I said, can I work with you? And said, well, you are a physician, therefore, why don't you apply for a postdoctoral fellowship? And I said, but I have not finished my doctorate. No. In this country, being a physician is a doctor, therefore you apply and you will see. So I applied, and sure enough, I got scholarship from the American Heart Association to work in the Adventist Health Study. You know the Adventist Health Study. How many of you are participants or members of the Adventist Health Study? Oh, only 3 or 4. Wow, you're missing a big thing here. Anyway, this is the Adventist Health Study 1, the one that started in the 70s, not the one that started in the 2002. So my assignment as a postdoc was to connect the 65 foods in the questionnaire with heart disease. What do you think was the hypothesis that I wrote in the proposal to the American Heart Association? What do you think was the hypothesis? No. The hypothesis was that eating meat is going to increase the risk of heart disease. That's what the hypothesis. We're in the 80s, and that's what it has been somehow shown but not fully demonstrated. So this was our hypothesis. But to our surprise, we found 3 foods that were related to heart disease out of the 65. Yes, indeed, meat was a risk factor, but mainly only in males and middle-aged males. Whole wheat grains seems to be protective. This has already been published by a group in Minnesota. But nuts were the winner. And that's what we found. It took us 3 years to get accepted into the scientific literature because nobody believed that eating nuts were protective. But finally, it was published in Archives of Internal Medicine, and here it is, the results. It shows here that in black means those Adventists that hardly ever eat nuts, or at least less than once a week, in black. And we have here the risk of myocardial infarction or the risk of dying of coronary heart disease. And those that ate nuts 5 or more times per week, so on a regular basis, had roughly 50% of the risk. We didn't believe these results because that just one food could be responsible for lowering the risk by 50%. This was unthinkable. So we were the first ones not to believe our results. What we did is to see if to duplicate it in different subpopulations. And we did what we call sensitivity analysis, comparing different subgroups. And here we have the subgroups. Here we have stratified by sex, males and females, and you see those that ate 5 or more times per week had roughly a 50% decrease. Older than 80 or younger than 80, the same. Vegetarian and non-vegetarian. There was an editorial saying Adventists have low risk of cardiovascular disease not because of nuts, it's because they don't eat meat. So people eat nuts instead of meat, and it's not that nuts are beneficial, is that you don't see the detrimental effects because meat is not present into the diet. This is not true, because vegetarians have also a 50% reduction compared with non-vegetarians. Remember, this is a relative risk. So vegetarians have already a low risk compared with the meat eaters, but among the vegetarians that do not eat nuts regularly, compared with those that eat nuts regularly, was a 50% reduction. Finally, with obesity or not obese. I mean, it seems like that was the case. So finally we believed the results and we tried to publish. And that was the first epidemiological study showing that nuts lowers the risk. That was published in 1992. And from there, in subsequent years, other studies were published, not using Adventist population, but other populations. And here we have 4 other studies show the same results. The Iowa Women's Health Study, the Nurses Health Study, and the Physicians Health Study out of Harvard. All seems to be in the same direction. Here we have the Iowa Women's Health Study. As the frequency of nuts increase, there is a decrease in the risk of a heart attack. With the Nurses Health Study, in pale blue, non-fatal or fatal coronary heart disease, and you see the same results. People that eat 5 times per week compared with almost never, there was a 40% decrease. Very similar results to us. So this is not something typical of Adventists. This is not something typical of a group. I mean, the nurses, the physicians out of Boston, in Iowa, in California, that seems to be the case. Physicians Health Study, exactly the same. So you don't need to do a meta-analysis here, because when you put all the results together in red, the Adventist Health Study, you see that all go in the same direction. So now the scientific community was starting to believe that, because when I first presented these results, even the president of the session said, this is not true. How come I'm going to believe what you are saying if there is some evidence that peanut oil in rats is atherogenic? And I said, sir, with all due respects, peanut oil is not the same as the whole nut, and what happened in rats not necessarily has to happen with humans, but that's the case. So there was a clear, what we call, dose response. So the more nuts, the lower the risk in an inverse relationship. And across the studies, it seems like for every serving of nuts per week that we increase, there is a decrease of 8% of cardiovascular disease. And here we have nuts and serum lipids. And that is what I spent my life. When I finished my postdoc, I told my wife, I have accomplished everything that we wanted. You already got an MPH. Why don't we go back to Spain? And she said, well, let's wait and see how the Lord will guide us. So I was ready to go to Spain, but I'm saying the university didn't allow me to. They wanted me to stay and continue to do research on nuts, and that's what I've been doing for 30 years. Basically, what I did is, for many years, is relate nuts one at a time, walnuts, almonds, and so on and so forth, with risk factors of cardiovascular disease. What are the risk factors for cardiovascular disease? Most of you know. One is obesity. Another is cholesterol, blood cholesterol. Another one is blood pressure. So if nuts have a beneficial effect on these risk factors, then it's more credible that nuts really are a causal relationship with cardiovascular disease. Because after all, the Adventist held a study, and many of these epidemiological studies are what we call population studies, correlational. You cannot see the cause and the effect. It's just by associations. So there are many nutrition studies that has been conducted by us at Loma Linda and in other places. And over 30 human studies has evaluated the effect of nuts on serum lipids. And most studies have been with walnuts and almonds, because California is the leading producer of the world of almonds and walnuts, and they export all over. So they dedicate a portion of their budget for doing research, because that, of course, since the results are typically beneficial, that increases their sales. So I was fortunate that the first study that I did with walnuts, it was immediately accepted at the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the most prestigious medical journals. And it was a study conducted in a metabolic kitchen at Loma Linda, in which subjects came to the kitchen 3 days a week, 7 days, 3 times a day, 7 days a week, to eat the diet that we were preparing. So, I mean, no free living, so they had to finish everything that we were providing them. And this was what we call a crossover design, in which the subjects first were exposed to one diet, that was the walnut diet, and later to the control diet, or vice versa. Some started with the control diet and then the walnut diet. And as expected, the diet that we gave given as a control was for lowering cholesterol. So in blue. So cholesterol was down, triglycerides was down. But the same diet in which 20% of the calories were replaced with walnuts, in yellow, further went down. So we didn't test walnuts against meat or against butter. We already know that it's saturated fat and is going to raise cholesterol. We test walnuts against a cholesterol-lowering diet. So it was clear that it was walnuts the responsible for this effect. We later studied almonds, and with the same model, but instead of 2 diets, were 3 diets. Subjects had the National Cholesterol Education Panel, NCEP, and then this is the control, and then they were placed on a 10% replacement with almonds of the energy, or 20% replacement of the energy with almonds. And as expected, the cholesterol followed the inverse relationship. The more almonds into the diet, the lower the cholesterol. So it was clear that there is a dose-response relationship on that. So what makes nuts, so good and on that, is that nuts are made up of a unique combination of nutrients and other compounds well known for their biological activity. Nuts are between 50 to 75% by their weight of fat. Even though we touch the nut and we don't get greasy, if they're a thing, but they're fat. They have between 15 to 25% of protein, and they have very little carbohydrates. They have fiber, they have minerals, they have vitamins, but this is what it is. And all of these components, by themselves, they have been shown to lower cholesterol. So they improve the serum lipids, and many clinical trials have shown that. I just want you to pay attention to this slide, because that is the summary of what we said as far as nuts and cholesterol. Nuts lower the total cholesterol, they lower the bad cholesterol, the LDL, they lower the LDL to HDL ratio, that is the bad to the good cholesterol, and they lower the triglycerides. So all the profile that is needed for good cardiovascular health. And they either do not change or they increase the good cholesterol, which is the HDL cholesterol. Besides the cholesterol, there have been many other studies, and I'm not going to explain or present all of them. Just nuts may also have other beneficial effects as far as risk factors. LDL, when it's oxidized, is one of the cholesterol particles that we have, is double the atherogenic effect. So it prevents the oxidation of the LDL because it has vitamin E, that is an antioxidant, and also is good for the endothelial function. So as far as the connection between nuts and blood cholesterol, I would say these are the conclusions. Frequency of nut consumption has been found to be protective against coronary heart disease in 4 American epidemiological studies. And across the studies, there is an 8% reduction in CVD risk for every weekly serving of nuts. And diets containing nuts improve the serum lipids or the blood lipids levels in the normal persons and also in persons with high cholesterol. That's another joke that was published in the newspaper when we did these studies. If you don't eat your nuts, you won't grow up to have low cholesterol like your dad. So now we have a monkey telling another one that, you have to eat the nuts. What have we learned besides that nuts lower the risk of cardiovascular disease? We are going to present now, in a few slides, the connection between nuts and diabetes. Let me explain. I'm almost half the way to present. Then I'm going to have some applications on what Ellen White said about nuts, and then we're going to have the floor open for questions and answers. So don't think that I'm going to be just lecturing and more slides and more slides. So if you have, bear with me from now, you have 10 more minutes of slides, and then we're going to stop, okay? So nuts and diabetes. Diabetes is very common, very prevalent, and has many detrimental consequences. So the question is, do nuts also help in the prevention of diabetes? Here we have a study with the nurses, and it looks like as the frequency of nut consumption increases, so does the decrease. It's not as powerful as it has been seen with cardiovascular disease, that was almost 50%. This goes only to about 20%, but 20% is 1/5. It's a relevant and significant reduction in the risk of diabetes. Here we have, specifically with peanut butter, and as you can see, peanut butter, especially commercial peanut butter, has not only nuts, it has other oils and probably have salt and sugar, so it's not exactly the pure nut, but you see that even commercial peanut butter seems to be also protective, for the risk of diabetes. Well, nuts are high in energy, high in fat, high in protein. So the question is, if we all of a sudden start eating nuts, are we going to put on weight? And if so, will the detrimental effects of having a higher weight contrast, the beneficial effects of eating nuts? So it's very important to know if eating nuts, really induce us to become obese. So we have some evidence to the contrary, but I'm going to present that. So first and most important, some of us are thin, some of us are obese. So the question is, Whether I'm thin or obese, should I eat nuts to prevent heart disease and diabetes or not? I'm going to say that on the slides that I presented at the beginning, the beneficial effect of nuts for cardiovascular disease is equally manifested on people that have low BMI, body mass index, or high BMI. And that was true for the Adventist Health Study and for the Nurses Health Study. Here is in the Adventist Health Study. Those that have a BMI of 24 or more than 24, so this is basically being thin or being overweight or obese, eating nuts also protects for heart disease. So if you are concerned about heart disease because one of your parents or your brother or your siblings got a heart attack and you are obese, eating nuts still gives you a protection. That's the first thing to know. So eating nuts equally protects thin and obese people as far as heart disease. But now let's go to the question. Does eating nuts make you obese? Here we have, in the Nurses Health Study, the people that had lower than a body mass index of 25, lower than 25 means normal weight, or 25 or above is overweight and obese. And as you can see, the protective effect for cardiovascular disease also was manifested. But now let's see the things the other way around. Eating nuts, as you can see, goes in an inverse relation. Oh, sorry. I don't know what I did here. I may need help in.
It looks like it came back. You turn around and you get.
Oh.
Is that how you want it?
It came back, but it's disconnected to what I see in my screen. Okay, but I can continue. I can, let's see. No. My screen has something else.
Is this PowerPoint you got? Microsoft PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Oh, Roger. He saved the day.
Okay, I want to see. It was in presentation mode.
You can type it.
No, that's no. Okay, let's go to the next one.
It's going here, changing here.
What?
See, you can see.
But okay, but it doesn't change here.
Okay.
But that's fine. I can. No.
Okay. Let me change. Let me open again. Close and open.
What?
Let me close and open it. That's okay.
What you can do whatever.
Yes.
Let's open again. Was presentation mode.
Yes. Slides.
Excellent. But now we have to move. No, but we have to go back to the where we were. Wonderful. Okay. Thank you. Well, I think we're back in business. Okay. Joe is so that those that eat nuts frequently, they are not necessarily obese, and vice versa. And I wanted to see, because most of the studies were done in America, so I spent a year of my life doing a sabbatical year at the WHO Center for Cancer Research, and there is a major epidemiological study, that's the European Population Investigation on Cancer, EPIC, and we found basically the same results here, that as the frequency of nut increases, it decreases the risk of obesity. And the thing that to me is the most important for us is the connection between nuts and longevity. Sometimes we focus on one disease or another, or on risk factor or not, but ultimately what we have to be interested is in how many years of life we live with good health. And we found here that in the Adventist health study, nuts seem to be protective for the younger than 80 or older than 80. So that has beneficial effects regardless of the age. And this is the risk of death among the oldest all for male and females, as far as the same frequency of eating nuts. But this is what I think is very important. Dr. Gary Fraser published a paper together with David Shablik, that was here today, and I said, I was the statistician, 10 years of life, and then the question, is it a matter of choice? This was a very interesting study in which, just using Adventist analysis, they found that two things. One, that Adventists live longer than the general California population. And here it is on this survival curve, that Adventists is here. These are the years of age, and the curve is they live more. And that is true for males and for females. But the reason is, what are the factors that explain these 10 years of life extra? And here we have, comparing Adventists with Adventists. There were 5 factors that could be identified that gives longevity. One is vegetarian, that is eating meat or not eating meat. The other one is doing exercise or not exercise. The other one was high consumption of nuts or not. And then being obese or not. And then have never been a smoker or not. So these factors by themselves can explain with the higher versus the lowest among Adventists, 10 years of difference of life. So here is not comparing Adventists with the general population, it's comparing Adventists with Adventists. So Adventists that never smoke, that they eat nuts frequently, that they have, they are not obese, that they do exercise, and that they are vegetarian, compared with just the opposite, explains 10 years of life, and here are the specifics. And if you see for nuts, it's about 2.7 in males and 1.8, so almost 3 and 2 years longer life among Adventists, those that eat nuts at the highest level versus at the lowest level. And here is the years difference as you add all these factors for men. Those that are in the good aspect of these factors, the average life or longevity is 87 years, and the other ones is 76. And for females is 89, almost 90, versus 80. So just these 5 factors can explain a difference of 10 years of life. So in conclusion, nuts are protective of coronary heart disease. Nuts improve blood lipids. Nuts probably lower the risk of diabetes. Nuts are not related to obesity. And nuts increase longevity. So, my closing thoughts. Daily intake of a small quantity of nuts, so frequency but a small amount, is one of the most accessible lifestyle or acceptable lifestyle interventions for the prevention of heart disease, diabetes, and longevity. So I'm going to now shift gears and not put more data on this, but say what Ellen White was the advice on nuts many, many, many years ago. I study carefully everything that is written by her related to nuts, and I'm summarizing in 2 statements. Nuts and nut foods are coming largely into use to take the place of flesh meats. So it looks like what she recommended is if we take away the meat from our diets, that is protein and fat, you can replace that with the protein and fat coming from nuts. We know now that is much more healthier. And the other thing is that with nuts, maybe combine grains, fruits, and some roots to make foods that are helpful and nourishing. So basically, she identified the measured food groups that now we are saying are the basis of any plant-based diets, that are fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts, and here it is. And there is another intriguing statement by Ellen White, although I'm just putting the concepts that is, care should be taken, however, not to use too large a proportion of nuts. In other words, nuts cannot be consumed in large amounts. They have to be just in a small amounts. And a more intriguing statement, almonds are preferable to peanuts. And I want to say, what is a large amount or small amounts? Let me tell you for practical applications. How many nuts are in a serving? A serving of nuts, according to the USDA, is 1 ounce. So this is 1 ounce. About 20 almonds or hazelnuts, about 7 whole walnuts or 14 halves, and peanuts, 32. That's what is 1 serving. And I like another definition that it says that I used for 30 years, is a handful. I'm a small man, my hand is small. There are big men with big hands. So I'm saying typically what it fits in your hand, I mean, this is what the servings that we have to eat per day, not more. So, practical applications, people regularly shop for foods rather than nutrients. And nuts can fit any dietary pattern or lifestyle. Nuts can be part of the Mediterranean diet, of the vegetarian diet, of the Indian diet, of the Asian diet, of the Latin American diet. I mean, fits any dietary lifestyle. It's not a food that doesn't fit. Nuts do not require cooking, preparation, or conservation, and can be easily transported and apportioned. Very easy. So, personally, I have some package of nuts on my drawer in my office, and the days that I'm in a hurry and I cannot do lunch, I just open the drawer and I have the nuts. They can be there for weeks, and unless they are walnuts, they don't go rancid. I mean, after you eating the nuts, it's not like eating a sandwich that you have to go and wash your hands because they are oily. I mean, you can eat nuts and your hands are still clean. So you don't need any other wrapper or any other package. It looks like this is the ideal, food that can be stored, that can be consumed, I mean, with no much preparation or cooking or inconvenience. So this is all what I have to say, and I'm sure that you will have some specific questions. I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. That's it.
You want to go ahead and take that, and then I can walk with the mic as they can have some answers. That way I can walk with the mic.
Okay. There is
Dr. Sabate, thank you for what we just learned. My question is, do we need to eat variety of nuts, or can I just eat one kind of nuts that I like?
That's a very good question. One of the principles of nutrition is variety. So I think the best is to consume a variety because it has many other differences in minerals and things of this sort. However, nuts are classified into two major groups: the ones that contain polyunsaturated fats, such as walnuts, pine nuts, and a little bit of pecans, and the rest, all the other nuts are mainly monounsaturated fat. So I would recommend that at least you have the two of these groups included in your diet. So that will be the best. If you like almonds, almonds are very similar to hazelnuts. So eat almonds and not hazelnuts, but I'm saying not eat only one type of nut and nothing else. That would be, a variety would be probably good. But you don't have to eat all the 9 types of tree nuts and peanuts and everything. I mean, just a few is enough. This lady was first.
Good afternoon, and thank you for your presentation. Since you're on the business of nuts, I'm sort of going in the mouth a little bit because it's for consumption. When my daughter wore braces when she was a little younger, it was very challenging to eat nuts because with the braces and the orthodontist, they will tell you no hard stuff in your mouth and all that, can destroy the braces. So she used to like nuts, but I couldn't give her nuts frequently as she wanted because of the braces, braces component. So you said you don't have to cook it. I get that. But how, like for children with braces, how would that challenge, how could we have overcome the challenge? And I'm also going to go to myself because currently I wear partial dentures. I wore partial dentures. I've lost 2 partial dentures that cost over almost $2,000 I have lost because I lost my 2 partial dentures, and that's what it cost me each time, like $900 and something to build. And I've lost them because I have had to take them out to eat some nuts because it sort of just get all up in the dentures.
Okay. If I understood you correctly, you asked 2 questions.
Thank you.
One is the issue of the allergies, and the other one is that nuts are a hard food and can break your teeth.
Not allergies, but the braces. When my daughter wore braces.
Braces?
Yeah, braces.
Okay. Well, when you are braces, sometimes it's challenging, but not only nuts, many other foods that can be a thing. My recommendation would be to have either in the form of peanut butter, I mean, and there is almond butter or whatever if people want to eat them, or maybe grind the nuts in a coffee grinder and mix in other places. So that's basically what we recommend. People that has bad dentures or has problems on that, I mean, they can either grind the nuts or eat in the form of a butter. I mean, that would be the situation.
You did mention allergies when you thought I had mentioned that, but now she does have allergies. There's no more braces issue,
Okay.
but she does have nut allergies. We can't even bring peanut in the house or anything. So you can, if you don't mind, if you can just touch on that for me, please.
Yes. Nuts has a bad reputation to produce allergies. I mean, there is allergies to many foods. Nuts is one of them, but it's not only nuts. There are 2 schools of thought as far as the allergies. Before, the idea was introduce nuts into the diet of the babies or the children. The later, the better, because then they are going to be more prepared and in case there is an allergy. Now, the tendency is just the other way around. It has been shown that by delaying the introduction of nuts into the diet of the babies or the solid foods, I mean, it increases the allergies. That as soon as they start eating solid food. So maybe in the 9 months, even before a year, nuts could be introduced one at a time and in small quantities to avoid allergies later in the future. I mean, this is the thing. We don't need to eat any food to have good health. So if somebody is allergic to one food, avoiding this food, that's fine. Many people is allergic to peanuts, but still they can eat almonds, or vice versa. They are allergic to almonds, still can eat other nuts. And even if they have allergies to all the nuts, so be it. So I'm saying there are many other foods, that nature has created that we could, enjoy. But yes, nuts, like other foods, like soy and like fruits, some they have allergies, some individuals. Definitely for them is not the lecture that I have had today. Okay. There is this gentleman over there.
I thought Margaret had some.
Well, thank you for coming. I know Dave real well. Question. You now see hazelnut milk and almond milk at the store. I use it on my cereal, not as much hazelnut milk. Is there any benefit with that, or is it mainly the nuts themselves because it's not as processed?
The almond is the one that I know, almond milk. Has very little almonds. That deserves a few minutes. If you bear with me, I can explain. All these alternatives to dairy, there are very few that are analogs. And by analog means that they mimic not only the physical properties, but also the nutritional properties. The only milk that I would say deserve the name of milk, in the sense that it's very similar as far as the nutritional properties of the dairy milk, is the soy milk. The one that now is out of fashion and many people say is bad. I know children that for the decision of the parents, or because they were allergic to dairy or for whatever reason, they grew up and they thrive on soy milk. This is the only one that we could say has very close properties to the milk. There is baby formula that is based on soy. All the other milks that are milks that now they are fashionable, that I'm drinking, because I'm intolerant to lactose, so I'm not drinking milk. So, the oatmeal, the almond milk, and whatever is the fashion, these are not really milks, they are beverages. So it's good to avoid dairy, it's good to use with the cereals, it's a refreshing thing, so it's nothing wrong. But I don't want, especially mothers or fathers that have babies or have children, don't think that by drinking this is equivalent to having dairy milk. It is not. For adults, that we eat more than what we deserve or that what we need, it's good to have these other things because I'm saying it's white, it tastes good, it hydrates us, but it has nothing to do with real milk. So a glass of milk has, 4 or 5 almonds. That's it. So it's not really the same. It's not almond butter plus water, okay? So that I want to make very clear, okay?
Doctor, we have a lot of questions here, so you direct me as to who I need to go to, okay? As soon as you tell.
There's a lady over there and a gentleman in the other side.
This lady here? Okay, right here. Here we go.
Good afternoon, Doc. I have a question. Does nuts contribute to arthritis?
I'm not aware of any study that has related nuts with arthritis. I am aware of many studies, a few, there are hundreds of studies now on nuts, so I didn't present just the one that we do at Loma Linda and a little bit more. There are several studies, maybe half a dozen, showing that eating nuts lower the inflammatory markers, CRP and other markers of inflammation. So if anything, there is indirect evidence that really eating nuts, may help on the arthritis, may help, but I'm saying there is not directly on that.
Thanks for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. You did mention that we should only have 1 serving of nuts a day. I have more than 1 serving a day. I'm an African. I love nuts. I have different varieties of nuts in my car. So what's the disadvantage of having more than 1 serving of nuts a day?
Sorry, what's the advantage of?
The disadvantage of having more than 1 serving a day. Yeah.
The disadvantage
Yeah.
of eating nuts?
Because you mentioned that we can only have 1 serving. That's advisable. But if you have more than 1 serving, what's the disadvantage? What does it do to you?
Okay, the disadvantages are several. Tree nuts are more expensive than peanuts. So the budget. Okay, that's one. People can choke on nuts. One of the vignettes that they put when I published that, there is basically a coffin and says, poor guy, follows the doctor's advice and now he choked on a nut. Eating nuts, some people that either you don't chew or for babies, you can choke and die. These are the disadvantages. The other one is that, especially the commercial nuts that are roasted, salted, and all these, when you start eating, you cannot stop. So if you eat more than what you should, yes, you can become obese. So these are the 3 major disadvantages of nuts.
I have 2. So my question is, roasted or raw? Which one would be more beneficial?
That's a very good question.
Okay.
The studies that I show, the epidemiological studies, are free-living subjects, and therefore is the way they ate. So I think these studies show that whether the nuts are raw, roasted, coated with sugar, still have a good advantage. Okay? So that's the first point.
Second one, does the soil...
Let me finish. However, it's obvious that nuts that are raw or dry roasted, meaning nothing is added, only heat, so no sugar, no oil, nothing, and we have studies on that, are equally beneficial. So, and from the culinary perspective, a raw nut and a roasted nut is quite different. I say it's a different animal. A roasted almond or a roasted hazelnut is a completely different taste and physical, chemical properties, organoleptic properties that are raw. But, if it's just dry roasted, it's good.
My second question is, does the soil affect the potency of the nut? Let's say the walnuts from California versus walnuts from Europe. Do you do studies like that?
Most of the studies has been done with the California walnuts, but regardless of the place, the composition of the nuts is the same. A walnut is a walnut here or in France. It may change a little bit the minerals according to the soil, but the proportion of protein and fat is exactly the same. So I think the place of origin is not as determinant with other things like legumes or other vegetables that do change more, but nuts change very little regardless of the place of origin. Okay, another question?
I've always been told that walnuts are the best of all the nuts and peanuts are the least nutritious ones. Is that okay? Is that true? Walnuts are your best ones and peanuts not that nutritious.
Okay. That's a very good question. Walnuts could be the best for 2 reasons. One was the first one that was a study published in New England, so it's the ones that got more fame, although that's not a valid reason. Walnuts are different than the rest of the nuts because the proportion of polyunsaturated fats is higher compared with monounsaturated fats. So as far as the ability to lower cholesterol is perhaps a little bit greater with walnuts than with the rest of the nuts, the ability to lower cholesterol. However, it depends on what is your background diet. I've been in California for 38 years. We still eat a Mediterranean type diet in which olive oil is the only fat that we add. Olive oil is monounsaturated fat, so eating walnuts is a good mix of compensation because you eat poly and monounsaturated fats. Many American diets and vegetarian diets use seed oils, so corn oil or vegetable oils, which is already high in polyunsaturated fats. Therefore, eating almonds, hazelnuts, peanuts, which are mono, is a good compensation. So it depends on your diet. It's better to eat more of ones or less of these ones. I don't know if I made things more complicated. Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, I think a couple of more questions and probably we can... Okay, the lady here.
Thank you. Yeah, about the drinks in Europe, they don't call it milk. They call it almond beverage, rice beverage, etc., etc. But my question to you is, how do you consider the ratio between omega-6 and omega-3? How do you think how important do you think it is to balance those two? I know walnuts have a good ratio, but all the other nuts, the omega-6 is like 300 times as high in peanuts I mean, the omega-6 in peanuts is 300 times higher than the omega-3, for instance. And cashew is the same thing. So how do you take into consideration the omega-3 ratio to omega-6?
Okay. I will be happy to answer this question at the end, privately, as far as the different things. But in general, let me make a generic question. There are two types of polyunsaturated fats. The ones that have a double bond at the third carbon, that's omega-3, or at the sixth carbon, that is omega-6. Most of the polyunsaturated fats are omega-6. Walnuts have the advantage to have a good proportion of the two, but the rest of the nuts do not have insignificant amounts. I think the issue of omega-6 versus omega-3 has to be accomplished with other foods in the diet, because nuts do not have enough of these fats, except for walnuts, to really deal about the ratio. Most of the nuts, except for walnuts, are monounsaturated fats, which has nothing to do with omega-3 or omega-6. I can talk to you later in more detail. Okay?
Doctor, do we have timeline here? The amount of do we have timeline in terms of questioning?
Yeah, there were two at the end, and we can. Yes, because some of you have other obligations.
We are told that heated oils are carcinogenic, and there are so many dry roasted nuts out there, and I don't have a clue at what temperature they are dry roasted. Do you have any idea about the temperature dry roasting is?
To roasted nuts, you don't have to put them at a higher temperature, and it just get dry. If you have not done that, you can try at home. You put into your oven for just a few minutes, and you get roasted nuts very quickly. So you don't have to put at high temperature or for a long time.
You say dry roasting, commercial dry roasting. At what temperature is that? At what temperature?
I do not know because I'm not a food scientist, but I did that, though, at home, and I don't remember the temperature. But it's just a few minutes. Otherwise, you're going to burn them.
Thanks, guy. We'll get to you next, okay?
I've learned a few things about nuts in the last few years. One thing I've heard that they have an enzyme inhibitor, so it's easier to digest if you soak them. And also soaking them is like the sprouting, the sprouting effect. And when you sprout something, it magnifies the nutrition. And so anyway, I think it's important to soak them to take off the enzyme inhibitors.
You are right that there are soaking the nut is another way to consume them. And if you have not tried and you want to do experiments in the kitchen with a simple thing, do that. Get almonds and soak them overnight, and you will see that they taste completely different than the ones that you buy at Costco or another place, and you roast them and you have a completely different. So it's the same food that soak, dry, or roasted, you can use on different recipes because it has different tastes and different properties.
Yeah, I like crispy nuts too, so I'll dehydrate them after I soak them, and so that way it's almost like they're dry roasted. But
Very good.
I think the raw nuts have the enzymes that we need, and true raw, I guess you have to buy from the farmer because they bringing them cross-state or into, from other countries, they have to irradiate them.
Okay, thanks. Okay, last question, and I'm going to close. Okay.
Okay, we got.
There was a.
We got 3 hands here, so.
No, only one.
Only
one.
Okay. So you're gonna get.
I want to keep everybody interested, and I think that many people want to go home. So
Sorry, you guys. I can only get one. Okay. Did you? Well, he's gonna.
No. I'm serious.
Okay. My family member was diagnosed with heart disease, and they had one incident, and they were given 1 stent. Then they had another incident. They were given 3 more. After that, someone referred a book to us, Preventing and Reversing Heart Disease. And in the book, he's very specific. He says, don't eat nuts in order to reverse heart disease. So I'm very confused today. I've cut out all the nuts for this person, and now I'm scared to death.
Okay, that's more a comment, no?
No, it's a question. So
it's difficult for me to follow. What's the question?
If you have stents and you have diagnosed heart disease, is it okay to eat nuts?
If you have what condition?
Yes. And you have stents.
Stent?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I understand that.
Thank you.
When I got this research done, the funding was coming from the American Heart Association. And the cookbook of the American Heart Association in the 80s said, do not recommend nuts to heart patients because they are high in fat. Thanks that they have changed, because now the American Heart Association puts nuts as one of the essential foods for heart patients. So nuts are good for cardiac patients, despite being high in fat, because they have good fat and good protein. So it's a resounding yes. I mean, people with heart disease, to eat nuts regularly. Probably is the ones that can benefit the most on that. Well, I'm very pleased and thankful for being invited here. I don't know what is your custom, but I'm saying if you can finish with a word of prayer, or you have other plans? No? Okay, so let's...
This was not a question, it's just a statement. I wanted to, again, thank for our church family how much we appreciate your coming. When I saw the advertisement, I thought you were a psychologist, you were going to be talking about mental issues today. And I was just going to say that we have 3 nuts in this congregation. We have a Rob nut, we have an Armando nut, and we have a Tim nut. But thank you, it was great. I couldn't.
Good sense of humor. That's good. Thank you.
Let's give a hand to Dr. Sabate. Thank you so much. I think now we are nuts for nuts. Let's have a word of prayer. Our most loving, gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this Sabbath afternoon where we learn your health message, especially about nuts. Help us to eat more nuts so that we can avoid illness and diseases, because we have to keep our body clean because it is the temple for you to reside in us. I pray this in the precious name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.